Do you ever wake up early in the morning before you've even opened your eyes and you're already feeling it? Not tired, not groggy, but shame. For something you said yesterday or something you didn't finish last week. For some version of yourself you were supposed to be by now. And the wild part is, you can't even name what triggered it, where it came from. It's just there, like persistent, like it was waiting for you. Well, Dr. Edward Hallowell, who's probably the most well-known ADHD specialist alive, said the single most debilitating part of having ADHD is the shame. Not the distraction, not the impulsivity, but the shame. And I want to show you where it actually comes from because it's not where you think and how to work with it. But first, how did we even get here? Well, 45,000 years ago, the traits we now call ADHD were way more common than they are today. There's a gene called DRD47R. It's a dopamine receptor variant, and researchers found a 0.85 correlation between how far a population migrated from Africa and how much of this gene they carry. That's an almost perfect correlation. The people who couldn't sit still, who needed novelty, who got bored and kept moving, they're the ones who crossed continents. They're the reason we're here today. And for hundreds of thousands of years, that totally worked. Your brain scanning everything at once wasn't a deficit, it was survival. Impulsivity wasn't a disorder, it was a rapid threat response. Hyperfocus during a hunt, that's the feature, not the bug. And there's a good reason to believe that way back, this is just how all human brains worked. Having a singular, laser-focused attention span wasn't the default. It may have actually been the exception. And then about 10,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution happened, and suddenly society needed people who could sit still, focus on one crop, follow a schedule, delay gratification, farmer brains. And the people with hunter brains, maybe 5 to 10% of the population, they didn't go away. They just started getting told they were doing everything wrong. And that's when the shame started. By the time a kid with ADHD turns 10, they've received approximately 20,000 more corrective or negative messages than a neurotypical kid.
Shame.
20,000. Sit down, pay attention. Why can't you just focus? What's wrong with you? Here's a bad grade, or you're so smart, you just don't apply yourself. And you hear that 20,000 times, and eventually you stop hearing it from them and you start hearing it from yourself.
Shame.
Because that's what shame is. Shame is the internalized voice of other people's criticisms, of society's criticisms.
Shame.
You eventually take it to be your own voice, but it's not. It's an accumulation of trauma memory. And here's where it gets really messed up. Shame triggers cortisol, your stress hormone. Cortisol impairs your prefrontal cortex, the exact part of your brain that's already underpowered with ADHD. So the shame literally makes your ADHD worse, which creates more situations to feel ashamed about, which triggers more cortisol, which makes the ADHD worse. That's the cycle. Shame makes your ADHD worse, your ADHD creates more shame. Now, I gotta be honest, when I first looked at this topic, I was like, I'm not sure this is something I'm an expert in. I don't experience a ton of shame anymore. I've been meditating for 20 years. I've done a lot of emotional work, a lot of sitting with childhood stuff. And when I sit with this and really like feel into it, it's like, yeah, actually there still is this thing. It's this general feeling of insufficiency. Like somehow I'm less than. And I think that's probably what ultimately keeps me up a little later at night too, because there's this feeling like one more thing needs to be done, even if it's just wasted scrolling or postponing sleep. It's like a quiet voice saying, I haven't done enough yet. So maybe I'm more in denial about this than I thought, and maybe that's the point. Shame is sneaky like that. It doesn't always show up very directly. Sometimes it shows up as staying up until 2 a.m. every night for no reason. So here's the meat of it. You're not broken. The way your brain works was the default human operating system for most of history. The hunters, the explorers, the ones who crossed mountains and oceans, they had your brain. The shame you feel isn't a response to something wrong with you. It's a response to a world that was redesigned for a different kind of brain about 10,000 years ago. And nobody gave you the memo. And the thing about shame is everyone has it to some degree. But if you have ADHD, you just got told 20,000 more times than everyone else that you're doing it wrong. So your shame isn't just shame, it's more like a deep societal rejection, a tribal rejection. It has a kind of trauma to it at that level that can make you feel uncomfortable in your own skin. So there are two directions to work with this. The first is backwards, working with the past, and the second is forward, working with the future. And honestly, I think you need both. So the past. Now, the shame is mostly stored in the body. There are parts of your body right now that are holding on to tension from things that happened, when you were 7. And those parts are still doing their job. They're bodyguards. They tightened up to protect you when you were a kid getting criticized, and they never got the message that it's safe to relax today. And what's worked for me, and I think this is more effective than just talking about it, although therapy definitely helps too, and please see a professional if you're dealing with serious mental health stuff or just for extra help in general. But the thing that works for me is to actually sit with these parts in meditation or even just quietly. And instead of trying to fix them or analyze them, we just approach them with a few things. First, we've got to respect them. When we just notice it without judging the shame. And then second, we give it curiosity. We actually get interested and listen to it for the first time. We have an open conversation with these wounds like, okay, what's your job? What's your function? What are you protecting me from? These parts of us actually have answers if we give them space. So it's good to interview everyone. And the third step is gratitude. Because when things do start to loosen, when the respect and the curiosity actually open up, you don't just move on, you stay, because these bodyguards got you through some rough stuff. They've been working for years, decades, and if we take the picture of the epigenetic research seriously, your parents' shame, their parents' shame, this stuff gets passed down through actual molecular changes in gene expression. So when we thank these parts, we're actually thanking a whole lineage of survival, potentially millions of years of DNA kind of doing its best. And gratitude in general is just this big old shame buster. Because shame is kind of a contraction, a closing off, a retreat, and gratitude is this heart opening, and it allows the full picture to come back in. This isn't to be confused with some sort of toxic positivity. It doesn't ignore the tight spots, but it just accepts that everything else is also true, that the miracle of being here, the breath, and whatever you're grateful for, all that stuff that shame kind of one-dimensionally causes you to forget about. My favorite meditation teacher says, if you don't liberate the past, you're living in a haunted house. It's really important that we do this work and then we live in this clean house with gratitude. Okay, so that's the past, but there's another piece, and this one is just as important. Your mind is visualizing your future all day long, whether you tell it to or not. And for most of us with ADHD, it's visualizing a lot of failure situations. That's the default, because that's what 20,000 messages trained it to expect. So you have to feed it something else. I'm not talking about manifesting or whatever. I'm talking about something much more concrete. There's an exercise I've done a couple times in my life that honestly kind of blew my mind. And there's real study from the Dominican University. People who write down specific goals are 42% more likely to achieve them than people who just think about them. And that's not a small number when you consider how big these goals can end up being. So here's how it works. You're going to ask yourself 2 questions. You're going to really sit with them, like 15 minutes each. And the first one, what does your life look like in 4 years if you visualize the best possible outcome? And when you do this, you can close your eyes and you can really get into detail. Like, what are you doing for work? Who are you with? What does your day look like? Close your eyes and really see it, down to the color on the walls and what does your morning look like, your evenings, your friendships, your body. This should feel like a stretch, kind of the maximum outcome you could actually see yourself becoming. But it doesn't have to be glamorous. Not everyone's meant to be a CEO. Maybe you just want a healthy family, or you just want to be present for your kids in a way your parents weren't for you. That's enough. Whatever is genuinely human to you and comes to you intuitively. And now the second question, I'm going to put this also up on the screen, is what does your life look like in 4 years if nothing changes? And this one's harsher because you kind of need to stare into the dark abyss here. But where does it actually go if you keep the same patterns? Get detailed about this one too. This is a common tool in addiction recovery, is getting honest about the grim outcomes so you're not lying to yourself about it. And then you take both of these and you put them into a 4-year roadmap. This sounds like a big task, but honestly, you can fill this out in under a half an hour. I'm including a free template in the link down below, but you can also probably find this anywhere online. It's called a relationship action plan, and it's incredibly effective for people visualizing a positive outcome for their life. At the top, you're going to write your 4-year vision, the like big goal. Then you have sub goals too. So you can talk about your relationships or your career or health or the things you generally want as your main goal and your sub goals in 4 years. And then you map it out, and you can write something in every 3 months or 6 months. You write what you've accomplished by then. And here's the key. You write it in past tense. So like you're looking back, like have joined a weekly friends group. So you're giving your mind a roadmap that's written from the perspective of the finish line. And every time I've done this, I've done it maybe twice in my life. I just fill it out, I put it in a drawer, forget about it, and then years later I find it and almost everything that I wrote down came true. So the power of this visualization is kind of uncanny. And I think the reason it busts shame specifically is because shame keeps its power by owning your vision of the future. Without a plan, the loudest voice about what's coming next is the shame voice. The "you'll probably fail at this too" voice. And you don't have an alternative, just short bursts of hope here and there, but this gives the mind an actual roadmap to look at, a mission, something concrete to walk towards. And every time you check off something on that list, it's evidence against the shame voice. Real evidence, not affirmations, but proof. Look, the voice that tells you something is wrong with you, it was installed. You didn't choose it. It was built by 20,000 extra corrections in a world that wasn't designed for how your brain actually works. And every time you feel that familiar tightness, that "what's wrong with me" feeling, that's not truth talking. That's a bodyguard doing its job it was trained to do a long time ago. So you can thank it, you can listen to it, and you can show it that you're safe now. And you can start building something to walk towards instead of just running from what's behind you. If any of this works for you or you do other things to work with your shame, let me know. I love hearing anything in the comments, and thanks for being here.